Hi guys, here we go again. Brexit brinkmanship by Boris Johnson and co is back. So here we have the Northern Ireland Minister Conor trying to do two things here. Sell the idea that the Northern Ireland Protocol is not working and that Brexit has nothing to do with the problems facing businesses. This either demonstrates a complete lack of understanding of what the withdrawal agreement and the protocol represent and the consequences of Brexit. He appeared on Channel 4 News with a pile of paper. Now I'll explain in a moment why this has happened and why it's the UK's fault and not the EU's that there are so many documents to fill out.
This is the documentation that is required to bring containers in from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, movement of goods within our own country.
It's not required yet, though, is it?
This is unsustainable.
It will be required.
No, this is... Sorry, well, forgive me, this is current. This is current. Now, what you're talking about is when the easements end and the protocol steps up to the next stage, which is in October, when this, by the way, will get worse. This is given to me by a haulier in Northern Ireland. This is what is required to bring stuff from Great Britain
and that is your
into
deal,
Northern
isn't it?
Ireland.
I mean,
movement within our own...
It's what was up and ready and what you
within our own United Kingdom.
I mean,
well, there are 2 points. The first point is under the provision. Hang on, under the provisions of Article 16, it says that either side can unilaterally take safeguarding measures if that's necessary. If there's societal interruption, you can't get more societal interruption than not being able to form a government in Northern Ireland. But the other point is that under Article 13.8, the protocol envisages the protocol being updated, renegotiated, or indeed even completely replaced by a new agreement. What we are trying to say to the EU is that Vice President Secretary's mandate needs to be broadened so that he can negotiate with us to find a landing zone where we absolutely protect the interests of the European Union single market, but recognise the reality that Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom's internal market and differentiate between goods that are destined for consumption and sale in Northern Ireland and those that are moving onwards through Northern Ireland into the Irish Republic and therefore into the European single market. That must be able to be achieved.
This fundamentally comes down to trust. The EU has been willing to take certain risks. Bloody hell, they have allowed the UK government to carry out the checks in Northern Ireland after they offered to do it. They trusted the Brexiteers to uphold their side of the agreement. Now, the reason we are in this mess is because the UK government refused to respect things that they signed up to and therefore make it more difficult for businesses to operate. Some of the solutions to these problems are Boris Johnson's government actually respecting the agreement. For example, the UK has to let the EU access real-time movements of goods moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. Now, this was something that was part of the protocol and the Tory government hasn't implemented it yet. Another is labelling. The EU has requested that goods produced in the UK for shipment to Northern Ireland only and not onto Ireland or that could end up in the single market could be labelled with something like UK only, not for export. But Brexiteers have rejected this, claiming that it's too expensive and too bureaucratic. Another problem at the ports is staffing levels. HMRC has not hired sufficient workers to carry out the checks, which have caused delays and other problems. This is not the EU's fault, this is the UK's responsibility. Obviously, Boris Johnson's government doesn't want to take responsibility for that either. And it's just easier to blame the EU for being inflexible. However, if these things were fixed and proven to be in operation, then the EU could allow things like a 1 permit per truck, rather than the mountain of paperwork you see in the clip. A priority lane at ports could also be set up for lorries that take goods to Northern Ireland only. The EU has said it's willing to do that, but it requires the UK government doing its job so a high level of trust can be achieved. How can you achieve trust if the UK government is talking about tearing up the agreement every other week? We have seen the EU take risks already to the single market when it came to medicines, but it deemed the risk low and allowed pharmaceuticals to flow from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. Allowing goods to move from Great Britain to Northern Ireland involves risk to the single market. The EU had hoped that the British government would work with it to reduce the risks and therefore reduce the measures necessary to mitigate the risk. The rhetoric from Boris Johnson's government is that the EU needs to be more flexible, but they don't provide anything in the way of confidence to achieve that. They do the exact opposite. They provide instability. They erode trust and talk about breaking international law at the drop of a hat. The situation in Northern Ireland is very complex, and frankly, I don't think the Tory government either understand that or frankly care. Johnson and his Brexiteers have spent the last number of years lying to the people of Northern Ireland, businesses there and those in Great Britain and the EU. To overcome the problems caused by Brexit will require building trust, but that seems an almost impossible task at the moment. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.